It's the International Soccer Preview. We are Soccer Files Canada. Welcome to Series 25, looking at the players of Euro 2024. This episode is looking at the players of Austria. Here we go. Hello and welcome again to the International Soccer Preview by Soccer Files Canada. I'm Kevin and we continue Series 25 on the groups and players of the 2024 Euro Cup. This episode covers Austria's players and in fact is part 2 of the Players Media Cast. Here we look at the selections. In part 1 we made a list of the candidates and introduced them and their likelihood of making the squad. And there is a link to part 1 in the show notes. This episode will be divided into 2 sections. In section 1, we'll look over the list we compiled in part 1 to see who made it and who didn't. And in section 2, we summarize surprises in the selections and review injury. Let's begin then. I guess this is section 0.5 because we're going to, between the introduction and section 1, talk about the preliminary squad and the warm-up games. So as far as the preliminary squad goes, Austria released a 29-man preliminary squad and then cut 3 players from that to make it 23 players. So, to make it 26 players, that's how many they're allowed. But in addition, they did a 12-man a 12-man standby squad. So we have seen teams do that. Usually it's one or the other, though. It's a preliminary squad or a standby squad. Austria managed to do both. But I'm going to say we're not going to pay much attention to that standby squad other than mentioning the names of players on it. The truth is that there were only 2 players at the possible level that we had, and the rest were at the possible but unlikely or seemingly off the squad or even new players brought in. So they're definitely fringe players on the team, and really nothing came of it. I don't think we will see any of these players brought into the cup. I think it's actually too late once the tournament begins for those players on a standby squad. The other thing too we won't pay much attention to is the warm-up games. Basically, they were quite different squads in each of the 2 warm-up games, and we think the purpose was just giving the selected players a run out. There was no sense of it being of it indicating who the starters are going to be. So probably the second warm-up game contained more of the players who we think will be starters, but we don't really think it sheds light on the issue, so we're not going to really talk about it here. Now let's move on officially to part 1. So this is the list of candidates that we created in part 1, and we're going to go through that list to see who made it, starting with the manager Ralph Rangnick, who we'll say was selected for the squad because he was not fired or anything before the tournament began. But we begin actually with one of the biggest surprises, which is goalkeeper Alexander Schlager, who we had as a definite candidate, and we really didn't consider the injuries in that ranking. We just ranked them where we thought they would be and let the injuries fall where they may. So he was a definite candidate for us, but he is out because of injury. We'll get more detail on that injury in section 2. So a shock right off the bat there. We had likely candidate Patrick Pens. He is selected. We had 2 possible candidates. The first was Tobias Lowell. He was selected only for the preliminary squad, but didn't make the final cut. And the other goalkeeper, Nicholas Hedl, was selected. So we have 2 of our goalkeepers. Gosh, where is the other one going to come from? Well, we had 2 players seemingly off the squad. Daniel Bachmann was named to the 12-man backup squad, so basically it wasn't him. The other one was Heinz Lindner. who was selected for the final squad. So let's talk about Heinz Linzer a little bit. Actually, he's just 34 years old, and he's been with Austria since 2012 with 36 caps for the national team. He plays for, or he's on the roster of Sion in Switzerland since 2022, but was actually playing on loan with Union Saint-Gilloise in Belgium since 2024. He also played for Basel in Switzerland. And Eintracht Frankfurt in Germany. He was part of the Euro 2016 squad on the roster there, but saw no action. But he was not selected for Euro 2020, made the 30-man preliminary squad there, but not the final cut, and had been off the team since March 2023. So actually not as long as all that. Anyway, Heinz Lindner called back in, basically because of the injury of Alexander Schlager. You could consider him kind of a replacement here. Okay, so quite a bit of movement there in the goalkeeper section. Let's move on to defense. Beginning with central defense, we have Philipp Lienhard as a definite candidate. He was selected. We have David Alaba. We had moved him to central defense. Most people would know him as a left defender, but over the period he had played more central defense, so fit into the narrative better here. But he was not selected due to injury, so another surprise there. Although it was, suspected when we did part one that he was injured. But from the outside, definitely a surprise. We had also a likely candidate in Kevin Danzo, and he was selected for the final squad. And so were our two possible candidates, Flavius Danilic and Leopold Querfeld, both of those selected for the final squad. Here too, we have a player who seemed to be off the squad that was selected, and that is Gernot Troner. He hadn't played for the team since March 2023, just like the goalkeeper Lindner there, but surprisingly was selected for the squad. The other player seemingly off the squad, Marco Friedel, was selected for the standby squad. And Simon Beidou, we jump up on the list a bit to the possible but unlikely level. Samson Beidou also selected for that preliminary squad, which effectively means not selected. Okay, to left backs we go, and we have a definite candidate, Maximilian Wober, who was selected, and also likely candidate Philip Weenie, selected, and possible candidate Alexander Prass was also selected. He's actually coded as a left midfielder, but we put him here because he had played only as a left back in the period we looked at, and those are our candidates there. So 3 left backs chosen. Over to the right back position, we have likely candidate Stefan Posch. So there were no definite candidates here, and Stefan Posch was selected for the final squad. The possible candidate Stefan Lehner, however, only made the preliminary squad there. Yes, Stefan Lehner not making the final squad. We move on to midfielders and defensive midfielders. We had a likely candidate in Florian Grillitsch, so no definite candidate, but the likely Florian Grillitsch was selected. And those are all the viable candidates we had for that position. But we have more in the central midfield, 2 definite candidates there. Nicholas Seewald was selected. However, the other definite candidate, Xaver Schlager, was an injury doubt and was not selected. So obviously that injury Well, we presume that it was the reason he was not selected, because he was a definite candidate. We had possible but unlikely Dejan Lubicic, and he was just named to the 12-man standby squad, so not selected. Left midfielders, no definite or likely candidates, but we had Florian Kainz as a possible candidate, and he was selected. However, our possible but unlikely Karim Onisiwo, not selected, not even selected for the 12-man standby squad, so that's a slap in the face. Right midfielders, we had no definite or likely candidates, but we had a possible candidate, Andreas Wyman, and he was selected for the squad. And that is all we had for viable candidates there. Let's move on upfield to left attackers. Again, no definite candidates here, but two likely candidates in Patrick Wimmer, who was selected, and Marcel Sabitzer, also selected, and I believe he's been named captain of the squad. Marcel Sabitzer. We also had a possible candidate in Marco Groll, who was selected as well. So three left attackers there. On the right side, we had a definite candidate in Konrad Lehmer, who was selected. The only other candidate we had was Christopher Lang at the possible but unlikely level, and he made the 12-man standby squad there. All right, up to central attackers, and we have our only new candidate on the squad. We'll come to him after we deal with the candidates we had on the list. Christopher Baumgartner was a definite candidate and was selected. And also our just one likely candidate, Romano Schmidt, was selected. The first of our possible candidates, Matthias Seidel, was selected for the final squad, but the other possible candidate, Muhammad Chan, was not selected. In fact, he's only one of two candidates who was at the possible level to be selected. Okay, let's take a look at our new candidate. That is Diurno Ballo. And as I say, the only new player added to the squad, but the Ivory Coast-born Ballo only made the preliminary squad there and not the final squad. So we would give a little bio information on him had he made the final squad, but we won't get into that here. All right, secondary strikers. Okay, I think I made a mistake in part one and put Michael Gregorich as a forward, whereas he's a secondary striker. Either way, he's a definite candidate, and he did make the squad. And for the forwards, we actually had no definite or likely candidates, so just possible candidates. The first of them, Sasha Kaladzic, was not selected for the squad. Injury probably playing a role in that, but we'll talk about that in section 2. Our second possible candidate, Marko Arnautovic, was selected for the squad, despite being an injury concern himself. And our last, the fourth of four, Maximilian Entrup, was selected for the final squad. The third of four candidate, Manpreet Sarkaria, was the other possible candidate that was selected for the standby squad. So basically not making it, but at least he had been closer than most. A couple of other candidates, the possible but unlikely Guido Bergstaller, also made that standby squad, and so did a player we had as seemingly off the squad, Junior Adamu, selected for that squad. All right. Well, we have three other names selected for the 12-man squad, and I'll just name them, and then we won't talk about them anymore. Goalkeeper Cisan Stankovic was named to the 12-man squad. Attacking midfielder Kevin Stoger and forward Benedict Pischler. Those three candidates also on that 12-man squad. Okay, let's move on to section 2, where we summarize the surprise selections, whether it be selected or non-selected. Actually, we have no really notable non-selections, because the only ones that were a surprise were players who are injured, so we'll deal with them in the injured section. And the surprise inclusions probably came up because of those injuries. That's definitely the case with goalkeeper Heinz Lindner, who is really brought in to replace Alexander Schlager, or to replace that spot. We don't think he'll be the starter. So again, last appeared for the national team in 2023 March, as we said in section 1. The other one was Nicholas Heidel, that goalkeeper. Several candidates ahead of him. He was possible but unlikely, but he was selected for the squad. He had missed, well, let me say, he had come to the team. His first appearance was as a substitute in November of 2022, and he hadn't started any games, but he was on the bench for 7 games in 2023, but then not selected for the last 4 matches. So Nicholas Heidel, not a shocker, but a bit of a surprise, because, as we say, there were players ahead of him. The other one is central defender Gernot Trauner, and he had last played for the team in March 2023. So Trauner is 32 years old, with 11 caps and 1 goal since 2018. No tournament experience, though. Was not selected even for the preliminary squad in Euro 2020, and Trauner plays for Feyenoord in the Netherlands. So both, or all 3 of these players, Lindner, Heidel, and Trauner, all selected for the squad. New players, the only new player we had, as we mentioned, was Thierno Ballo, who was cut from the preliminary squad. And now let's move on to injuries. So recovered from injuries and able to play is Marko Arnautovic. He had an injury concern. It was a recurrence of a hamstring muscle injury. That's the second time I've seen hamstring muscle, which seems like 2 separate injuries to me. Anyway, his injuries were usually short, coinciding with international periods. That's why he didn't play a lot over the past little while, but he is fit to play here. Players dropped due to injury. Probably equally important are the first 2, Alexander Schlager, the goalkeeper, and David Alaba, the left back / central defender. Alexander Schlager was out for knee surgery since early May with an unknown return date, but surgery probably tipped us off that he wouldn't be available. He had been a definite candidate. So that's goalkeeper Alexander Schlager. David Alaba, the manager, really regretted him not being able to play. Alaba actually asked if he could kind of be on the squad for the tournament, so he was brought along for kind of morale reasons, or as a kind of a spiritual leader in the dressing room. So it's not officially on the squad, but is kind of together with the squad. His injury was a cruciate ligament injury from late December, and it lasted until the end of the season. He's currently not listed as injured, but I don't know if he's played any games. Anyway, it is injury keeping him out, because they would want him if he was available. We did have him as a likely candidate there. Next is central midfielder Zaverschlager. He was a definite candidate based on his participation, but out with a cruciate ligament injury since mid-May and was under an unknown return date. So obviously didn't make it back in time. And then possible candidate Sasha Kaladzic. We should actually put him in the injured but not a strong candidate because he was only at the possible level here. Kaladzic was out with a cruciate ligament tear since February, so we thought he might make it back in time. And perhaps his injury is recovered and he just wasn't chosen. We're not dead sure about that. Okay, that is it. That brings us to the end of our thing. So I'm just going to get the final graphic set up and then say a goodbye message. The message is, we would like to thank Mike Tripak, Big Sound Music, and Pixabay for the wonderful background music called Dance 90s accompanying this mediacast.